At the 2020 Future Strategy Conference, this time held virtually. So we have an excellent set of speakers today that will take us through a number of important topics on international trade and the development of global value chain, including the implication of the global pandemic, as well as other national and international policy developments. So we have titled this session, Trends and Dynamics of Trade and Global Value Chains from the lenses of the UK and China. So the first speaker today will be our colleague from NIESR, Xuxin Mao, Principal Economist. And the title of his presentation is Applications of Coriolis Big Data for Trade and Global Value Chain Analysis. The second speaker is Professor Alasdair Smith at the UK Trade and Policy Observatory at the University of Sussex, who will present their work on value chains and UK domestic competitiveness. We'll follow with Jakob Sagdansky from Cambridge Econometrics, who will illustrate what is their view of UK's position in global value chains using the OECD Trading Value Added database. Finally, we'll have two speakers from China. So we have Professor Miaojie Yu, Deputy Dean of National School of Development and Director of Center for Global Economic Research at Peking University. Professor Yu will talk us through the RCEP Free Trade Agreement and the dual circulation of the Chinese economy. And our last speaker will be Professor Guy Liu, Head of Peking University HSBC Business School, who will present his work on China's internationalization and the impact on the relationship with the UK. So a little bit of housekeeping information. So we plan to take questions at the end of the presentations, but you are welcome to use the chat facilities and we will collect them and we can discuss them at the end. It's good that if you can unmute yourself and perhaps have the video off, unless you want to make comments later on. Finally, just thanks for all for your attendance and your interest in the event. And I hope this is a very useful and interesting one. And a special thanks to Rebecca Harding and her team at Coriolis Technologies for inviting us to host this session. So first of all, Xuxin, would you like to start your presentation?
Thank you. Can all of you see my slides from the screen share?
Yes,
okay.
We could see it, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for all the participants of this section, and I'm always honored to be able to speak something. But this, so essentially, I'm not a trade economist. I'm more towards to the quantitative side and trying to see what kind of trade data can be used to do some trade analysis. And I was very fortunate to be able to be supported by Innovate UK and work with Anna's team and also my colleagues at NIESR, and in the same time trying to get to work well with Dr. Rebecca Harding and the Coriolis data. So today's section is about how we try to use the big data to do the trade and global value chain analysis. What kind of things we could do, and what kind of things we can improve. And hopefully by showing this kind of slides, we can have more understanding of what the Coriolis can provide for the further analysis and forecasting of trade-related phenomena. So this is the joint research with Anna, Manuel, Larissa, and Lei. And we are very grateful to the financial support from Innovate. So outline is like this.
Apologies, Xuxin, before you go on further. I think we cannot see well the slides. We can only see your computer. So I think something is not working well.
Just a minute. Is better?
I mean, it's better, but I still don't have the full screen, right? Can you put the full screen view?
Yep. So can you see the outline now?
We just go back to the first case.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you can go on this way. I mean, if you're not cutting through any of the slides.
Okay, so we are going to the second slide about outline, and if everybody can see it, I can continue, and if not, I will try to explain things in a clear way. So we basically want to explain the situation based on the following things. First of all, after some background introduction, we illustrate what we can do from the 3 application cases, and then we provide a summary and a proposal for further research. So the first thing we could do is we can do some simple supply chain analysis and sectoral analysis. As you can see from the screen, we could do a lot of things in terms of generating some indicators showing the situation of supply chain of specific products in terms of world potentials. And if we go to next slide, we can see the supply chain maps could be measured by Corelius data, and we just use the surgical mask to illustrate the situation. And this it has been well documented by the last section using the Corelius and ADB data. So basically, it could provide not only a specific product analysis in terms of supply chain, but also for other sectors to be analyzed. And here is the first application case. And from the geographical distribution of the UK exports and across regions, we could get ahead of time before the official data. I know it's not rocket science, but Corelius could provide data before Office for National Statistics published, so that we could get the situation about the UK situation where the exporters come from in terms of regions and what kind of products they are exporting, what kind of goods and services they are producing. So that's the potential application case. It's quite handy. And another application case is about using the UK World Trade Bubble maps. And we can see this is a feature embedded into the Corelius multilateral platform, and that's what we can get for the past 3 decades. First of all, we can see what's the situation in 1992, and then we can see 1999, and emerging from nowhere. For the next slide, we can see China becoming a very important trading partner of the UK, while European stays to be the most important one among the US. And this is the situation that still holds true in 2019. So from the bubble map embedded into the multilateral system, we can see the dynamics of the trade situations to the UK, and we can do similar analysis to other countries, to other sectors, and to other products. And the third application case is to see what kind of things we could do in terms of COVID supply chain. We did some analysis based on some data analysis. We can see that US actually play an important role in terms of current situation. It accounted more than 1/4 of total revenue in terms of PPE products. And to the contrary, China is not that important, and we have updated the data just now that China accounted about 10% of total revenue based on the updated ADB Corelius data, but still no one near to the US dominant in terms of revenue. And in terms of numbers of firms, we could see that the PPE supply chain is roughly holding the same picture as we shown from the revenue. And here we can see there are different separations of processes in terms of value chain. And we are going to separate into different parts of the system to see how different countries works in different parts of supply chain. As you can see, the red part shows that the US is always the biggest player in terms of supply chain of PPE. And to the contrary, China is not that important except in terms of numbers of firms in processing PPEs. And similar things hold to the components and the final products and the distribution. And this is quite contrary to what we have thought and what we have seen from the media reports. And the potential explanation from the correlates data after NIESR analysis is like this. There was a typo here, sorry for that. China wasn't the dominant power in terms of PPE supply chain in 2019. So all the previous financial data was based on 2019. And in terms of numbers of firms or revenue, China is less important than US or other European countries combined. So the US and the European countries have the capacity to produce enough PPEs when COVID started to spread early this year. But it seems there might be some mask nationalism played and there might be some information missed. The capability wasn't mobilized to produce enough PPE to fight against the virus. And on the contrary, China was mobilized and stimulated to produce enough products to supply not only enough PPE to the Chinese citizens, but also have supplies potentially to support China, to support non-Chinese citizens. So that's the thing that we can find. And we did a little bit of digging in terms of vaccines, and we find similar pictures. And indeed, that US and European countries have high capacity in producing vaccines if the vaccines patents can be levied and distributed to other companies through the government coordinations. But we don't want to reproduce the same mistakes that we found in the masks and other PPEs production supply in early this year. And I hope that multilateralism or at least some degrees of collaborations can be done so that we could fight against the COVID pandemic in a more efficient way. So in the end, I would like to conclude that there have to be multiple resources to produce COVID data and which provide fast and convenient solutions. And we not only could provide country sectoral product level analysis, and in the same time, we can provide some trade indicators to do some more sophisticated research. And it could be a good tool also be used for business analysis and trend predictions. And there are indeed some more research, further plans for doing more research from our side. And we could improve the price assessment and robustness of the methodology and the model. And we could provide more frequent updates of the data so that more potential partners can work together to see the trend and analyze what we can do in terms of trade data. So it has good potential, and we are willing to do more research, and we are going to work together with the fantastic researchers that are going to present research in this section, and hopefully we can produce more fruits for us to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Xuxin. Just double checking before we go to the second presentations, whether another of the team members, Manuel, has anything to add to Xuxin's talk.
Yes, Anna, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I think it would be good to inform the rest of people attending this session about more applications or facilities that this platform can provide. So if you allow me, I can, if you allow me to share the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, so can you all see my screen? So basically, I have opened the Coriolis platform. Xuxin has given some examples of applications that we can produce by using the Coriolis platform. It would be good to inform that Coriolis can produce outputs from several perspectives. It can produce trade statistics at the sectoral level and also at the country level. Interestingly, it can offer the option of analyzing trade at the regional level. If, for example, you are interested in producing statistics of Latin American trade to the world or to one region in particular, like Asia Pacific, this platform is able to produce it. But one facility that is very interesting to highlight from this platform, if we for example are interested in comparing trade performances across countries, which is a useful tool in order to help trade research and also policy design. The Coriolis platform offers a wide array of trade indicators and is able to make rankings across countries, depending on the indicator we are interested. I think it's taking quite long to load the dashboard I wanted to show, but basically, if you want to compare countries across their export concentrations ratio, which is a common trade indicator, the trade intensity index, and more interestingly, how countries evolve over time in terms of the intensive and extensive margin of trade across products and markets, Coriolis can constitute a very useful platform in order to deal with several research questions. As you can see, there is a wide range of indicators that we can produce with the Coriolis platform, and if you are interested in a country in particular, you can compare its performance with respect to others all over the place. But not only trade indicators, but also common geopolitical indicators that we can find in the literature, like corruption index, foreign policy index, internal conflict index, and among others, and also macroeconomic indicators. I consider it a very useful tool because it allows us to see how our country of interest is performing with respect to, for example, other countries in the region, and also within the whole world. So as you can see in the lower left side of the screen, Coriolis produces the ranking of countries according to the indicator we are interested in. And it also allows us to download that raw data, which will be helpful to produce some econometric analysis in other packages.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. That's really interesting. And I think now we can move on to the second presentation by Professor Smith.
Good. Let me try and share my screen.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to present this work here in this interesting conference. As you can see, this is work that I've been doing with two colleagues. We're all at the UK TradePolicy Observatory at Sussex. And the work I'm talking about here is building on a long-standing approach that we've developed to the modeling of trade policy. using computable partial equilibrium techniques. So what I'm going to talk about here is talk very briefly about the way we've developed our techniques for this particular application, use it to illustrate the application of the approach to the modeling of a version of Brexit. And I'll finish off with a brief discussion of future directions that we might take this work in particularly responding to the events of the economic effects on the global economy of this year's pandemic. So first of all, what do we mean by modeling Brexit with value chain effects?
Professor Smith, apologies for interrupting you. I don't think we can share the screen. We can see the screen.
Oh, you can't see the screen.
I don't think I can't. So I assume others can't either.
Let me try again then.
Did you click a share screen?
Yeah, I did indeed. Okay. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, now it worked. Thank you.
Okay. All right, but I can't seem to get it into the full.
No problem.
So you'll have to make do with it.
Yeah, we will.
Having the summary down the side.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the first slide just had our names in the title of the talk. But here on the second slide, you've got the overview that I've just described. So let me talk briefly about the modeling approach here. We're modeling Brexit with value chain effects. We're using a computable partial equilibrium model characterized by imperfect competition, product differentiation both by firm and by country of origin. So the partial equilibrium modeling approach allows us to work at a suitably disaggregated sectoral level. As you can see here, we've got 148 output sectors, and that allows the inclusion of lots of the relevant kind of sectoral detail that you want to have in doing empirical modeling of trade policy effects. The additional feature here is that we've introduced 56 intermediate sectors. So the intermediate sectors are at a slightly more aggregated level than the final goods sectors. So in a sense, we're moving a little bit away from the pure partial equilibrium approach and introducing an element of general equilibrium features through having the intermediates sector, thereby combining the relevant sector detail with quite a lot of with important cross-sector effects. I was reminded somehow of Deng Xiaoping's description of the Chinese economic system as socialism with Chinese features. So what we've got here is partial equilibrium with some general equilibrium features. And we're applying this approach here to the modeling of a UK-EU post-Brexit free trade agreement in which we have no tariff and no tariffs and quotas, but we have non-tariff barriers because the UK has exited from the customs union and the single market. And this table here illustrates the effects that we get from our model applied to Brexit. Reduction, let's look at the first column first, the one with no intermediates. A significant reduction in UK output generated by quite a large decrease in UK exports, resulting from the increased trade barriers to UK exports into the EU, which is roughly speaking half the UK's market, and a somewhat smaller reduction in imports, again caused by increased barriers for goods coming into the UK. The reduction in imports is obviously good news as far as output is concerned. So the net effect of the export changes and the import changes is this small reduction in output. But what I really want to focus on here is a difference between that first column of no intermediates and the effect of introducing intermediates into the model. And introducing the intermediates effect gives us a significantly larger reduction in exports, 12% going up to over 16%, and a smaller reduction in imports going down from 7% to 5%. And the net effect of both of those things, reduced exports and reduced import increased exports and reduced import substitution, means that the modeled output effect here is more than twice in the model with intermediates. So what we learned from this is...
Alasdair, sorry, apologies for the interruption. Can you try to press F5 and see if it works, the full screen? If it doesn't work, we can just move on this way.
Okay. Let me...
Okay.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, no, perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I hate it when people don't show their full presentation. I couldn't.
It's okay.
F5. I'll remember that.
F5.
Okay. So modeling intermediates makes a difference. We have a bigger output effect because reduced exports are partially offset by reduced imports. And we're getting a more than doubling of the output effect. So intermediates are making a big difference to the results here. It's worth doing this. And it's also worth thinking about why that is. Well, Brexit affects UK competitiveness, not just directly because of the effects of trade barriers, but because it affects the cost of intermediates in the UK economy. A high proportion of UK intermediates inputs are imported from the EU. So the cost of intermediates rises because of Brexit. And this has an additional effect, an additional indirect effect in all sectors. It raises the UK export loss and it reduces UK import substitution. Of course, there's a negative effect on the EU as well, but it's a much smaller effect on EU competitiveness because the share of UK goods in EU intermediates is very much less, and there's no effect on the competitiveness of non-European firms because their cost of intermediates is not, it's very little affected by, is not affected by Brexit because their trade barriers are not changed. So introducing intermediates makes a difference, and it makes a difference for a reason which is relatively easy to explain. It's the effect on competitiveness through the prices of intermediates. So this is showing in a simple application that it's worthwhile introducing intermediates into this otherwise partial equilibrium model. So the last thing I want to say is, what might we think about when we're using this kind of modeling approach to think about the effects of COVID-19, or if we've been pessimistic, COVID-20 and 21 and whatever other pandemics might come along on global value chains? I suppose the initial reaction of many people thinking about the economic effects, the global economic effects of the pandemic, were to do with short-run disruption. So there's a lot of anxiety early on in the year about the possibility of quite widespread disruptions to global production. And I suppose we now have a more optimistic view of that. Partly, the Chinese production system rebounded pretty quickly to the initial effects, from the initial effects of COVID-19 in China. And there haven't been subsequent global effects from the economic disruptions caused by COVID in the rest of the world. So I suppose I would argue that we probably want to think not so much of short-run disruption, where we might be reasonably optimistic about the responses of the economy, but what effects that might have on longer-run effects. So when producers are thinking about the costs of sourcing from foreign supply chains, should they in future be attaching risk premia to foreign supplies of intermediates to make a suitable allowance for the possible future short-run disruptions. And of course, it's not just foreign supply chains. There could, in principle, be disruption arising from pandemics to domestic supply chains. The Japanese-owned car plants in the UK have not so far suffered supply chain effects from COVID, and indeed seem much more anxious about the effects of Brexit on their supply chains. But the effect could be there, and that could increase the appetite of producers for greater diversity of intermediates. And both of those things are effects that it would be relatively easy to model in the kind of approach that I have outlined here. So I hope I've given you enough of a feel for what we've done, why it's a worthwhile thing to do, likely to produce significant economic effects, and how this approach might be used to look at wider effects on global value chains. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to questions at the end of the session.
Yeah, that will be good. Thank you so much, Alasdair. That was really excellent. So we can move on. I think we are doing well in terms of time, which means that we will have some time for discussion at the end. So next is Jacob from Cambridge Econometrics. Jacob, I guess you are ready.
I am ready. Yeah, just Alasdair, if you wouldn't mind
Sure.
sharing your screen, please, then I'll be able to start presenting.
I think I need to. Okay.
Thank you, Alasdair. Thanks.
All right. Sorry to be slow.
No, it's okay. It's good.
So I think you should be able to see the presentation now. Is that correct?
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So welcome everyone. Today I'll be presenting Cambridge Econometrics work on the UK's position in global value chains and the insights that we have been able to obtain using the OECD TIVA database. So just a few words kind of to cover the background of the project. So we have been commissioned by the UK Department for International Trade to analyze UK's role in global value chains. That was in 2019, and that kind of coincided with the release of the new OECD TIVA database. And I think the main research questions were to assess the degree to which UK sectors are dependent on imported inputs in production of their own exports. And at the same time, we also tried to trace how UK exported value added kind of travels through the world, whether it becomes embodied in other countries' exports or whether it actually is exported even further before it gets consumed in a third country. And just a few words on what TIVA indicators are. So TIVA database has been kind of derived from multi-region input-output tables. So those are kind of the regular input-output table with additional dimension of importing or exporting countries. So you can imagine huge input-output tables. And from there, using a series of matrix operations, you can start developing individual indicators on how countries are involved in value chains. So those indicators include indicators on how, for example, UK value added can be broken down. So how UK exports can be broken down into value added components from different countries, and also how exports are used. So you can derive some indicators on how, for example, the exports are used, whether they are used for domestic consumption in a country that has imported them, or whether they are used in production of exports. And at the same time, you can also see how those exports contributed to different sectors. So when thinking about sectoral analysis, you can think about, for example, UK software company providing software to a Chinese manufacturer of smartphones, and that value added originating in services sector becomes embodied in exports of manufactured goods such as smartphone, and then leaves China embodied there within Chinese exports. So I think just to illustrate first the concept of backward linkages, so those are the indicators that try to dissect the value of UK exports by country of origin and also by sector of origin. So using this diagram, you can see here on the right side, if we start at the right side, we can start breaking down UK gross exports into components originating in the UK. So those will be, for example, domestic value added, as well as components originating in other countries. And then if you start looking further to the left, you can actually see that we can even look further and start identifying individual sectors that have been contributing to the value of exports. So for example, we can identify different services sectors or manufacturing sectors that have contributed to the value of UK gross exports of a particular sector. And the same could be repeated for individual foreign countries that have contributed to that value. So I think just to present now the kind of the first estimates or indicators based on that particular values. So here in the chart, we are presenting UK backward linkages. So again, how UK exports are made up of different components of value added. In gray, you can see domestic value added. In blue, you can see EU value added. And in kind of darker blue, non-EU value added. So from the chart, you can see at the top that about 85% of UK exports is composed of UK value added, so the value added that has originated within the UK. And then you can see about 15% of value added originating abroad, and with slightly higher share of non-EU compared to the EU. And if you compare those figures to kind of similar economies in terms of the size, such as France or Germany, for example, you can see that the degree of integration, backward integration, tends to be lower for the UK compared to those two. So for France and Germany, you can see about roughly 21% of imported value added share in gross exports of those countries. And that's based on 2015 figures. And compared to the United States and China, larger economies, I think UK is kind of similar to China, but slightly is slightly more integrated compared to the United States in this case. And I think just to explain this further, we have to look at individual sectors and their position. So if we look at this chart, which presents kind of the same breakdown of exports, but this time we are identifying individual sectors which are contributing to UK gross exports. And what you can see here at the top, we've got manufacturing sectors. So those will be sectors at the top with the highest share of foreign value added. And at the bottom here, we have services sectors, which tend to have a very high share of domestic value added and kind of a very insignificant share of foreign value added. And I think that chart pretty much explains the previous slide, because as we all know, UK specializes in services. Therefore, that results in a lower backward integration when we look at the UK as an entire economy. And that's just basically driven by its specialization in services sectors. And in general, the low imported value added content in services tends to be observed in all countries. It's not just the UK. Services sectors tend to have shorter value chains, and that contributes especially to the UK's low backward integration, just because of dominance of sectors such as financial and insurance activities over here, or for example, wholesale and retail trade. So those are the largest exporting UK sectors. So now we can move on to forward linkages, and that's, I think, using a similar diagram here, an example of German construction sector importing something from the UK. We can trace how UK value added travels through the world and how it becomes embodied in another country's exports or in another country's final demand. So using those indicators, we can, for example, observe that if a German construction sector of company, for example, used or imported some financial services as a developer, for example, to support development, there will be, so essentially the UK value added from there would travel through German construction output. It would become embodied there. And then it could enter here German demand for construction. So it remains within Germany and it becomes consumed here. And we can identify that UK originating component here. But let's say if the developer, the German developer who was using UK based firms, services, for example, financial services, to build some skyscraper in France, for example, then that component here would be embodied in German exports of construction, and we could still identify the UK component of those exports so that we can see how UK value added essentially travels through different countries and becomes embodied in other countries' exports. So looking at the measures of that integration and how we can assess the UK's position in value chains based on forward integration, the measure for this chart here is UK value added in foreign exports, but it's expressed as a share of total gross exports. So just to explain the figure briefly, here with the number 15.3, we can see that the UK value added exported further by any of the EU countries accounts for roughly 15.3% of all total UK gross exports. So essentially 15% of UK exports becomes exported further by EU countries, and at the same time about 8.4% of UK gross exports gets exported further by non-EU countries. And as you can see from the comparison to other countries, the relative forward integration of UK compared to France and Germany tends to be equally strong, if not stronger. And that kind of, again, reflects to some extent the nature of UK's integration with specialization in services, which kind of become embodied in manufactured products and then travel on to other countries. So using the example, for example, of let's say software or financial services used in manufacturing, which become embodied and then travel further through other countries through the value chain. And I think just probably as a note on the composition between the EU and non-EU, we can see relative dominance of EU as an exporter of UK value added. I think that's an important point here, especially in terms of informing the current UK exports or import strategy, the trade policy that's going to emerge after Brexit. And that kind of signifies the importance of EU as facilitators of UK's trade with non-EU partners as well. And here, I think, just as a summary, we stacked countries based on the sum of the backward and forward linkages measures that I've just presented. And we've ordered them from the most integrated on the left to the least integrated on the right. And as you can see, the UK here is placing, I think, 49th out of 64 economies that are available in the OECD TIVA database. So in general, that reflects a slightly lower level of integration in global value chains compared to other countries. And again, considering other factors that might affect it, such as the size of the economy or specialization, that's not necessarily indicating maybe lower level of competitiveness. It's just probably a reflection of certain characteristics of the economy. And in case of the United Kingdom, I think it's obvious that services specialization tends to drive low level of backward participation in global value chains. But at the same time, forward participation seems to be on par with many similar countries. So I think just probably summarize this argument, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to have slightly lower measures of backward and forward integration. It's just probably a reflection on the structure of the economy, and it's more informative to look at how those indicators evolve over time, and that's probably something to explore further if one wants to establish, for example, some claims about productivity or about competitiveness against other countries. And just probably to wrap up the presentation on the informational data set, to highlight, I think TIVA dataset is still experimental, so many strong assumptions have been used in developing that dataset. So you end up with indicators that can vary in quality because the assumptions might be more or less influential depending on the level of disaggregation or specific sectors where those assumptions might not be as valid. And I think that the limitation of research is, to some extent, the level of disaggregation with relatively few regions and only 36 sectors. And we also have shorter time series compared to traditional trade statistics. However, I think there is a 2020 release upcoming that will cover slightly longer time series that might be useful. And I think those findings could potentially be revisited and explored further. And just as a note on further research that I think is possible with those TIVA indicators. So currently at CE, we are looking to extend our offering to kind of add to our modeling offer and be able to develop trade projections based on value-added concepts. And at the same time, I think that hasn't really been explored yet in literature, but one could also use the TIVA indicators for econometric estimation and hypothesis testing. I think that might be an important insight to kind of carry on with the analysis side by side with the traditional trade measures. And in terms of further development of TIVA statistics, I think those have to address the assumptions. So again, as I mentioned, the assumptions play a key role in terms of how reliable those figures are and how far you can disaggregate those figures. And I think to some extent also the timeliness. So I think it takes about 2 to 3 years for the OECD to release the data. And I think that kind of delays the analysis and decreases slightly the relevance for the current purposes or the objectives for policymakers. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be happy to take any questions after the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Jacob. I think we need to move now swiftly to Professor Yu. Yeah.
Just a second, let me stop sharing my screen.
Professor Yu, yeah, hi.
Hi.
Are you ready to share your screen and to start with your presentation? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We have 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can you see this clear?
Not yet, but yeah. Now we need to make, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So the topic, and because we only have 10 minutes, so please allow me to talk about to introduce the Chinese economy instead, and also some policy arrangements. So the title is the asset and the dual circulation of the Chinese economy. And please allow me to talk about 2 questions. Number 1 is about the major challenge faced by China today. And the second one is how to handle with these problems, these challenge. So when we say for the challenge, basically is obviously is about the COVID-19 and also other major problems. And if we look at the COVID-19, we see from the IMF, we have already got these what we call the WEO projections. And as you can see here, you can see if we look at the economy recover, so the world GDP will fall 4.4% for all over the countries, for all around the world. And if we look at the high income country, so the ratio will decrease 5.8%. And for the emerging economies, will be 3.3%. But if we look at this carefully, we see there was only one country they got positive economic growth rate, which is China, about 1.9. So, and my personal hunch is that maybe the real economic growth rate will be even higher than 1.9. Perhaps in the end of this year, we'll be go to 2.1 or 2.3% indeed. But no matter what, I mean, 2% will be something like is a normal prediction. So that's number one. Number two is, suppose we look at the challenge, we say, well, obviously number one is the China-US conflict. When we say conflict, it's not only about the trade conflict, but also related to other international finance, international investment, and even about foreign affairs and so on. So there's the first challenge. And the second one is about WTO. We know that the most important part of the WTO is the Dispute Settlement Committee. But it seems that the Dispute Settlement Committee doesn't work very well these days. So there's another challenge. And the last one is people say, well, there was a FDI withdraw from China and then go back to the US and the EU. So that's one of the concerns. And the other concern is it possible for some industry to move out from China and to other countries, especially to the East Asia countries, and maybe even go further to Africa? So that's another major challenge that that Chinese economy had to face. So this is about the challenge. And then how to handle with this challenge. So you know that just maybe 3 weeks ago, we got the 5th plenary session of the 19th Central Committee CPC. So this indeed, this conference is really important for Chinese economy because they point out one possible solution about to boost Chinese economy. That is what we call the dual circulation. Basically, it includes the domestic economic circulation and also the international economic circulation. So before I go further, please allow me to talk about the later when we talk about the China's economy, what is the most important competitive advantage of the Chinese economy? So the first one I would like to say is the huge market size. Because we know that China got 1.4 billion, and then we got 0.4 billion people with the income class, middle income class. And also, I mean, the domestic market size just get bigger and bigger. So that's the first part. But the second one is more important, what we call the whole industrial chains. For example, if you look at this, if we use China's industrial cluster, China's industrial classification, we got 41 CIC at the 2-digit level. And if you go to 3-digit level, we got 207, 4-digit level, even higher, 666. So perhaps this is the only country that with what we call the entire industrial classification in the world. So that's number one. Number two, if you look at the Chinese export in 2019, so if you look at the export scope, which means you count the number of the HS 8-digit number, we got the 7932 number of the products that export to the other countries. So that's another one. And then suppose we look at the industrial cluster. This is more interesting and to me. For example, if you look at this part, you can see we have many countries, we have many cities, the industrial cities, but then the point is that each city, they focus on different industries. For example, if you look at the most popular or the most important province, for example, Guangdong here, you see Shenzhen and Dongguan, they focus much on electrical products. But this is pretty different from another city. For example, Shantou, they will export, major exports are toys. And then if you go to the north, for example, Hebei, then Xintai will export cashmere, and Langfang will export what we call the furniture and so on. So we can see that this industrial cluster is really important because it will generate positive spillovers and for help firms to realize the increasing return to scales. So that's pretty important for us indeed. Okay, and the next part is about, sorry. So yeah, so the next part is about when we talk about domestic circulation on the policy arrangement, basically we'll talk about 6 parts about the policy arrangement. Number 1 is about the factor return marketization. If you look at the central government's policies, the documents now today, they focus much on the factor return marketization. And basically they focusing on the neutrality principle. They just say, well, the SOE, the state-owned enterprise and the private firms, they had to be treated equally in the China's market. So this is called the factor return marketization. And perhaps the most important one is the second one, trade liberalization. Because when we talk about trade liberalization, indeed, this year, China has many new policies to boost the trade liberalization. For example, the first one, FTZ, free trade zones. So starting 2013, we got the first FTZ, Shanghai FTZ, and till today we already got 21 FTZs. And you can see that up to 1 or 2 years, indeed, I mean, all the eastern and the middle province, they will cover, every province will have the FTZ. So what's the most important context of the FTZ? Number 1, this is they will adopt the negative list to welcome FDI, the negative list. This is the most important one. And the second one is the trade liberalization and also the investment liberalization. That's the second one. So they also have many other policies due to time constraint. I will not go further, but this is the first important one. It's about FTZ. Okay. And the second one, we also say, well, investment facilitation for this part basically is improving the business environment. They also got many policy arrangement launched in August to facilitate investment. And the next one is about what we call the boost domestic consumption. And it's truly important. Basically, they use the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. For example, you can see that the government issued a special debt to boost the domestic consumption. For example, this year, the total package of China's fiscal policy will be 28 trillion renminbi. And if you want to know how much is equal to the US dollar, you just divide it by 6.5, 28 trillion renminbi. So this is number 4. Number 5 is also truly important. This is what we call the industrialization, urbanization, and also informatization. So basically is that they were focusing on several important areas. This is what we call the regional economic integration. I mean, please look at this map. You can see that in the next 5 years, these areas are the major part for the Chinese economy to boost on. And the first part here is the Yangtze River Delta. And then this is the Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, what we call the Greater Bay Area, the GBA. And then is another one. This one is what we call the Jingjingji, which means it's Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei area. And also this part is another 2 important cities, Chengdu and Chongqing. Just below this, what we call the Yangtze River, zones here. And the last one is the Yellow River Basin for that other part. So these 5 mega cities will be China's focus in the next 5 years for economic development. Okay, and this part is about the international trade. So basically it's about the GVC. If we look at this map, then clearly now today, the world is divided into three groups. First one is the European, and the second one, well, is the US NAFTA, or also USMCA FTA. And the last one is, you can see this is Asia Pacific, and the hub is China. So it's pretty much clear. But then what we want to emphasize is, if you look at this one, we got what we call RCEP, the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This just signed maybe 10 days ago. Yeah. And this was truly important for China and all other 14 countries. For example, is the countries that are covered for the RCEP, including the ASEAN 10 countries, and also China, Korea, Japan, and Australia, New Zealand, and so on. Yeah, so this is what called RCEP. And why RCEP is so important? Time is short. Let me go directly to the most important point. Why RCEP is so important? Because this is perhaps one of the biggest trade blocs in the history. We got about 30% of the world population, and also 32% of the world GDP, 30% of the world trade, and also the investment as well. So this is the RCEP. And what's the major content? Number one is it covers commodity trade. Commodity trade, 90% of the all industrial products will cut tariff to have a zero tariff in the end. Some of them are immediately, but some of them had to wait, for example, after 10 years or 20 years. So that's number one. Number two is about the rule of origin. For the ROO, basically, they allow to be accumulated. For example, one product, if you import raw material and intermediates from Indonesia, Malaysia, and also Japan and Korea, and then you assemble it in China and export to the rest of the world, then RCEP, they allow to them, you count these value added together and then to enjoy the ROO. So that is about the rule of origin. And there's the FDI. For the FDI, basically these 15 countries will adopt the negative list. So it's allow these 15 countries to reinforce the FDI. So this is about FDI. And also service trade. For the service trade, it's interesting. Initially, 7 countries adopt the negative list, and the other 8 countries adopt the positive list. But finally, this positive list will turn to be negative list in the end. And the last one certainly is the digital trade. We know that the digital trade, basically, for example, especially for the digital commercial trade, then basically talk about the e-commercials. And if we talk about the digital service trade, then will be something like the outsourcing, like the what we call the service outsourcing. It also covered in here. So basically, the last one is the 1B. Sorry, OB, the bell and the load, OBOR. So for the OBOR, basically we have 2 load. One is the marine silk, and another one is called the land silk. And for my personal opinion, I think that the first one, the marine one, will be more important than the land silk. And the key reason is because China's economic relationship with the ASEAN 10 countries, the economic link is more important, is more strong than compared to the land silk road. So there's another point here that I want to make here. So time is short, so let me summarize. Number one is Chinese economy has recovered from the COVID-19, and then it will realize 1.9% GDP growth rate at the very least this year. And the second one is we think that globalization is still the major trend for maybe in the 2020s. So that's the second one. And China's hard position in the Asia Pacific GVC will be reinforced, especially after the launch of the RCEP, the RCEP. And for Chinese economy, maybe the dual circulation is a good strategy to boost the Chinese economy. So this is what we're trying to report, what we're trying to share to everyone today here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yu. That was really interesting. And then we have to move on now to the last presentation. So we have 10 minutes, and now we have to be a bit more strict, and then we can have about 10 minutes for discussion. So Professor Liu, please, if you want to make a start.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we need to make it once.
Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Not now.
Not now. Is it not? Can you see now?
No, we could see before, but not full screen.
Oh, not full screen.
But I think.
Yeah, can you see now? Full screen.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, yeah. What's that? So share screen. Now shared. Yeah. So now you can see it. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to present my observation of how the Chinese investment in the UK and its impact to our business here. Chinese internationalization has through 3 stages. The stage 1 is 1918 to 1999. At that time, the concept of Chinese internationalization is about import everything, import goods, import technologies, import business models, norms, or even cultures. And I remember in the beginning of the 1980s, they even import secondhand suits to China as well. So that's the core concept at the time of internationalization. Then stage 2, which is after China joined the WTO, the internationalization is really about export of the Chinese made China goods to everywhere in the world. So at that time, we have change of our life in terms of a question, can we live without made in China goods? That's what I remember around the beginning of the century. Everyone tried to have a life, see whether or not they could live without China made in goods. So that's the focus of the second stage of China's internationalization. Then the third stage is start from the 2013 to date. It's about not only export Chinese goods, but also export Chinese services and also capital. So now China becomes country, export both goods, services, and also the capital, and make Chinese investments outside China and more engaged with internationalization for global governance. So this is something which is we call 3 stage. And now what's the impact of the third stage of China's internationalization? We will see that they start to export Chinese capital is really big jump after 2012, which is a jump from 61 billion US dollars a year, whole country export capital to the whole world, jump to 107 billion. And then the highest is about 2016, which is almost 200 billions. And then also 2017, we slightly declined to 225 billion US dollars. So they create jobs, which is about 1.3 million jobs around the world through Chinese investment. So then with this tides, with this movement of Chinese internationalization by exporting their capitals to the outside China, what impact on the UK business and economy? Are we benefits or are we being really hugely being impacted? Then what we see that actually, I mean, China's peak investment into the UK is 2017. 2017 is year, which by the end of that year, China start to restrict our investments, which is start from the beginning of 2018. So 2017, we reached the peak of Chinese investment inflow to the UK economy. It's 28 billion, which is about 20% of our total FDI investment in the UK. Then 2018 is decline, not just total FDI to UK decline, and then also the Chinese investments in the total of the FDI to the UK is declined from 20% to 10%. 2018 partly or mainly is Chinese government to restrict their FDI to outside China. Then the 2017 and 2020, we know that the UK has changed their welcoming attitudes to the Chinese investments, start to be restrict some particular areas. So that's why the investment is being declined. Then the impact also, the time of the period, China opened the door for Chinese investments far outside of China to the world. The time period is not that long. Actually, it only start 2016, 2017, and then 18, 19. And then they start to, tap the investments closely, which is close their investments, not very open. But the impact is really profound. You could see that right now, only a few years, that we will open our economy to Chinese investment. You could see that every one, which is 0.25% of the properties in the city, are owned by Chinese investments. So that means every 1 in 4 buildings in the city actually is invested by China or Chinese companies. So that's the first impact. The second impact is our utilities. You have seen that this Hinkley Point nuclear power station, 33% owned by the Chinese investments, and there is about 5.4 billion pounds to pump into this project. And further, China's also investments engage in our national grid, which is the electrical grid, and they have a 10% of the stake of the capitals there. So that means every night when we put the lights on, there's a Chinese capital effect there. Then go to taking the bus in London City, which is now the BYD. They have invested over about 2 billion over the years to this project to build up electrical buses in London with Alasdair LT. They joined together. So that means if you travel in London, you cannot, without Chinese investment there. And further, taxi, that has been taken by Geely, which is the beginning, which is not 2011, 2012. They take over this black taxi through a couple of the years. So they spent 50 million pounds at the end to completely acquire this company. Now it's 100% owned by Geely. So even you say take taxi or you don't want to take the buses, you still cannot avoid the effects or impact of Chinese capital on the transportation in our London city. Then say we use a mobile phone and stock data in clouds. Then you say, look, this is something strategically business or sector which shouldn't have a Chinese investment there. And you see that the global switch was taken 51% of the stake by Chinese called Daily Tech, which is a private company from China. And then they bought 51% of the stake and then spent 2.4 billion pounds investment on that. So even in the clouds, we store our data in clouds, we cannot also not avoid Chinese investment. Then go further. Then you've been tired to watch film, cinema. This is the most popular cinema in the high street. It's sort of, the big symbolic building in Oxford Street, which is all the cinemas. They have been owned by Wangda Corporation, which is this Mr. Wang Jianling. And he invested with 921 million pounds to buy the whole cinema chain in the UK. So even you say, look, I have entertainment time, and then I'm tired to go to cinema to watch the films, it's still being surrounded by Chinese capital. Then you say, I book a holiday away from the UK. I'm sorry, you still cannot away from the Chinese capital. Xuxin and then bought the Skyscanner, was one of the most popular holiday book websites, and the Chinese capital is still there. Then further, You say, look, I'm going to eat pizza press, not the Chinese food. Chinese capital is still there. They bought the Pizza Express at 900 million pounds with 100% stakes. So now the Chinese capital is everywhere. Water, the last thing, so water is still got 9% of the stake of Chinese capital investment, which is about 265 billion. It's quite big investment. And then go this one, which is mobile phone components manufacturer in the UK, which is recently being acquired by 550 million pounds by a Canal Bridge company. And so they just acquired it. Then now you say, look, shoes. If you try to work away from your home, you must wear shoes, and the shoes now is been also by the investment from Hong Kong private equity funds, which is 100 million into the UK shoes industry, which is acquired the almost 195 years old history. So the implication is that the Chinese capital is everywhere in the UK economy and business. In terms of amount of the capital, it's not that big, it's not that dominant, but impact is a big, because you get the impression that if you want to have something in your life without effect or impact of Chinese capital, it's quite hard to find in the life of the UK at present. I mean, that's the reality. And that's something we need to face. So because time is short, so we'll get to the conclusion, is that the investment is not that big, but impact is significant because it's everywhere in the UK economy and business. So we have to face it and then find how to live with the Chinese capital. We don't expect that Chinese investment that will continue to rise dramatically in the coming time. No, because we have turned our welcoming arms away from the Chinese investments. That's which has been current change at present in the UK. So as a result, we expect that Chinese capital investment still will continue, but in a very, very small scales. At present, UK has about more than 100 Chinese companies operate in UK and create a lot of job opportunities for us. These companies and the Chinese investment actually serve as an anchor to the link between the two sides of the economy. So that means it makes it very difficult for two economies decoupling from each other. Then further, because right now we know that politically the China and the UK doesn't go well and have a very, tense relationship. But however, if you ask a simple question, can trade relationship being separated from political relationship, then from what we observe, it is possible because of the both sides. They have each capital investment on the both sides. So that will be link or serve or separate the two relationship and create a dual track relationship between the two sides. So in other words, the trade economic relationship will be separated from the political relationship. Even the political relationship is in tension. So that's what I expect in the coming, what will happen in the coming time. So we hopefully, the relationship will be improved further, but we hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was indeed really fascinating. I think unfortunately, we don't have time for a lot of questions. Perhaps we can just make a couple of quick questions and then we'll have to move on to the next session. So yeah, probably a couple, we could fit a couple of questions.
Anna?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, apologies for having two screens from my side. I have problems with my laptop whenever I connect to Zoom. Just a clarification to Professor Alasdair. The figures you showed at the beginning of the output loss and export and import loss, are they an annual average loss in output, export, and import? And if so, what is the time horizon for this calculation? Or is it just a short-run effect of Brexit?
Well, I think the answer is it's not a short-run effect, nor is it an annual change. It's a step change, because the policy change is modeled as a single step, moving from UK membership to a UK free trade association outside the customs union and the single market, and that's associated with, you know, whatever it is, a 2% reduction, you know, a permanent step down of 2% or 4% in UK output. It's a comparative statics exercise in a numerical model. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I don't think we will have time for more questions, but I just wanted to thank all speakers in special and everybody that attended the session. And I'm pretty sure we could follow up with emails if we wanted to make further comments and questions. Thank you all so much and have a good afternoon.